Okay, so we are joined today by Parag Shah, who is a customer business executive for Amdocs. And several questions for Parag. The first one for you, of course, is the easy one, is what do you guys do, what do you do, and what does Amdocs do in the realm of open 5G, open networks?
Well, Amdocs as a company has historically been a billing and OSS company, so providing services and software to the largest operators around the world. For me and my team, we're in a network a division called the Amdocs Open Network Division, really focused on driving innovation in the mobile space from a core network perspective as well as a RAN perspective, providing services and software to enable the better performance of networks. And obviously to help drive the openness in networks, which we strongly believe in.
Okay, and your customers are obviously operators, but also enterprises.
Yeah, we're operators around the world. We work with media companies, and we're also now getting more engaged with enterprises because of the work we're doing around in the US, CBRS driven private networks, and then around the world with some private network activities that we're taking, bringing all our capabilities together from the software perspective and the services perspective.
Okay, great. So from your perspective, I know you've been looking at this for a while here. What do you see as the benefits here of open networks compared to the traditional approaches to building a network?
Yeah. Well, if I look at today's networks, and I come from an Ericsson background, and most of my a lot of my career has been spent at Ericsson, a company I really respect. But I think a lot of those networks are closed ecosystems, and everything is driven, built hardware, software, in the way they want to have it, in the way that they see the world. And from my perspective, what openness is going to give us is the ability to bridge the gap and introduce more diversity in the network, hardware ecosystem, and software ecosystem, create and spawn more innovation across a lot of different verticals, not only for operators, but more importantly in 5G with enterprises and different types of use cases that we're going to see, especially with an IoT perspective. And I think an area that I feel that is going to be really important as part of openness is just driving common data sets and data models that we can take the best information that's available inside the networks and build more automation and build more intelligence into what we provide to the different services and the different use cases that 5G is going to have readily available.
Right. So you mentioned the operators, but you also mentioned the enterprises here as well. So do you see that, and I think when we discuss open networks, open RAN, the discussion has really heavily been on the operators themselves, but do you see as much opportunity with enterprise as well?
Well, I do, and I think the reason is that if people are trying to deploy a private network, right, and they're looking for the best radios or the best, maybe the lowest cost perspective, and they want to be able to just pick and choose like Wi-Fi is today. And I think the more that we can have equipment that's open, kind of standards based, and it's more, for lack of a better term, plug and play. I think it's going to spawn the innovation and really the deployment of these private networks. I think when we deal with enterprises today, what we see is that they're not really familiar with the wireless architecture, and they're still learning. They know how Wi-Fi works, and now we're moving into this world of wireless and licensed 3GPP and all the different buzzwords that are out there. And I think they need an open network that's more kind of plug and play driven. So that the complexity is removed. And when we remove that complexity, I think we're going to see more and more applications and more innovation in that segment of the market. And if 5G is all about, enterprises and being able to redefine the way enterprises work, I think we need to provide them the capability to make it simple to deploy and easy to use. And then that comes with openness.
Right. So let's go back to the operators a little. Obviously, we've had some operators who have deployed open networks or starting to now. What sort of challenges do you see them facing as they move to an open 5G architecture? And then secondly, how do you, Amdocs, address those challenges?
Yeah, I think it's I look at it two ways from an operator perspective. I think existing operators are on a plan, and I think part of the challenge is, where do I even begin? Is this all really fully baked and fully kind of ready for prime time? And how do I introduce it in my network? Because when we do have the challenges I think they face is really understanding, how does my world change from today? I get everything from an Ericsson and a Nokia or a Samsung or whoever. And now I have the ability to maybe take radios from one vendor, software from another. How is it all going to work together? Who do I call? How can I leverage where do I put all this data? If it's all common, how can I maybe look at redefining my back office systems to be able to have it all interop, where I don't have, vendor A management systems and vendor B management systems, but one platform that can truly be used across any different vendor to be able to reduce cost and reduce my total cost of ownership. And I think there's a lot of these questions as to how do I do it? And from our perspective, we see us being able to, take away the complexity and helping them do that. We are more multi-vendor. We work with different uh, uh, people's equipment, for lack of a better term, from a core network perspective, a RAN perspective, and we're just here to eliminate that complexity.
Right. Yeah. So, do you see as a first step education? Because
I think there's a lot of education. There's a lot of work that still has to be done on standards. I mean, I think everyone likely agrees. We're in the early stages of this. Yeah. We hear carriers, maybe concerned about what this really means to them, and are they going to get the cost savings? And I think our view is the more that we push forward with driving the standards, with building the use cases, to trialing it out inside the networks, the more that we can progress and make things more, bring those benefits that we talked about earlier to bear. Right. And yeah, I think, and from our side, it's all about the data and the intelligence and how we can make the networks operate better, both from an operator perspective as well as from an enterprise perspective.
Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that when the enterprise moved to open architectures for their data centers and their corporate applications and things, it didn't happen overnight. It was a long time before they got off those big iron, mainframes, right?
Exactly.
And we went client server, and then we went to open, and all the rest of it. It was generational, and I think a lot of people think that the mobile networks, why aren't we doing it immediately? But it takes time, and the operators have a lot of planning to do, as you said.
I think people have planning to do, and I think we as an industry need to create the right ecosystem to take away that complexity. In our view, is we want to work with the different players in the space, from cloud providers to chipset makers to software providers to hardware manufacturers, to try to find a way to make it more seamless, more interoperable, and build a coalition so we can drive a common message across the industry.
Right. So do you see that building as the ecosystem is one of the first things we've got to do here, or Amdocs?
Yeah, I think we're starting to, we're starting to see people coalesce around it. And I do think that ecosystem is so important. I believe that's what makes Ericsson successful. They're very good at, or any other NEP equipment provider. They're building these coalitions and ecosystems to make things real. And the more that we can do that, the more that we can test amongst ourselves, the more that operators will be willing to, take the chances, deploy stuff inside their network, and realize the benefits that we all believe is there.
Right. So, what sort of differentiators do you see Amdocs bringing to this market? How do you differentiate yourself within either with that ecosystem or within the ecosystem for the operators?
I think our ecosystem has always been about software, systems integration, and automation. And because we are multi-vendor, we don't make hardware. We have a lot of experiences working with different manufacturers across the spectrum to be able to pull things together. And we see our role as to drive that change. And people come to us for advice. People come to us for wanting to know our perspective. What we see in the market, how how far things along are maybe in the open process, and then ultimately to build applications, and software and automation capability that leverages our IT background as well as our RAN and core competencies to create some unique software that'll make the networks perform better. Again, both from an operator perspective and an enterprise perspective. So I think for 5G, it's absolutely critical to help build all these use cases,
Right.
so we can all make money.
Yep. So you see it as Amdocs can bring an ecosystem here to get that hardware deployed, the core, the RAN, but then the differentiation on top of that comes from the software, obviously, right? And that's when you can start deploying that over, or differentiating through that over the next few years.
Absolutely. Yes? I mean, we have strong rollout capabilities to help people deploy and operate these networks. We're a SaaS provider from a CVRS perspective that gives us a unique perspective for enterprises. And we see what their needs are and what their capabilities are. And we want to work with operators to help them, bridge the gap on how they go to market with some of this and leverage, what we can bring from a billing and an OSS and a perspective to simplify the rollout process.
Right. So last question. I normally ask what worries people or what keeps them awake at night, but for this one, I'm going to ask a little bit differently. Through 2021, what do you see is going to be the major developments through 2021 for the open networks, both operator and enterprise? Where do you think we'll be by the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in the beginning stages of a lot of this. And I think operators like Dish, who are promoting the open ecosystem, are going to make a lot of progress in deploying, putting things into the field. And so I think there's going to be a lot of work really defining the standards. There's going to be a lot more prototypes, and software being developed to test and trial and help, I'll say, the industry become more comfortable with everything open. And obviously there'll be people who maybe lag, may not want to be as proactive in the way they deployment, but I think more and more people will start to test it, put it in their labs, trial different types of solutions, across all, maybe it's fronthaul interfaces, or maybe it's RIC and applications around the RIC, to really get the benefits that we all believe is going to make this a success.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we hear right now that, there's a lot of enterprises looking at CBRS, for example, and doing small deployments, small trials, getting their feet in the water here. And then over the next 12, 18, 24 months, start doing the bigger deployments. I see the operators doing the same thing. I think most operators in the world are looking at the open architectures, and they're going to progress at different times. There's obviously the Rakutans and the Dishes of the world,
yeah, exactly.
but there's a lot of other operators as well. So I think it's going to be, I think 21 is going to be a pretty interesting year.
I think we're pretty excited about it because we think it's the beginning of a journey that's going to lead to kind of I hate to use a revolution, but maybe more of a revolution in the industry, and then a changing of the way we view things and the way we look at networks and how they're supposed to operate. And I think that kind of change and fresh perspective that we can all bring to the table is going to make us all better. I mean, be it, an Amdocs or an Intel or an Ericsson or, whoever else in the chain. Yeah.
All right. Well, Parag, thanks very much. We've been chatting with Parag Shah, who is Customer Business Executive for Amdocs. Parag, thanks very much.
Thank you, Ian. It's good talking to you and catching up. Thank you.